What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering. I hope you have a wonderful day. If you are, make sure you leave a like on the video. And if you haven't yet, click that subscribe down just below on the right-hand side of the video, or make sure you're still subscribed. I would greatly appreciate it. Now, I talked yesterday that Facebook was scared. They knew that there was this kind of coordinated journalistic effort to take them down a peg. Now, we know that what is motivating modern day journalists for going after Twitter or Facebook? It's because Facebook still allows too much, in their opinion, free speech. You don't see hit piece after hit piece about Twitter because, well, they block anybody right of center or shadow ban or suppress them. So the mainstream media machine is totally fine with it. When you look at Facebook, it's actually still possible to gain a toehold if you are a normal person. I've actually thought about still posting my videos on facebook.com/thequartering, because for as many people as say they don't use it, there seems to be more users than ever on Facebook. And quite honestly, it is less suppressive than most people think, as bad as it is. But yesterday, Facebook put out this kind of preemptive statement about how there was going to be 30 journalists coordinating, and it just dropped. At noon today, it dropped, and there's been an absolute ton of information put out there, none of which is super surprising to me. Judge orders details of alleged Google-Facebook collusion to be public. Lawsuit says Google contacted Facebook after it emerged as a powerful online ad rival. This via Fox Business. Details of a collusion between Google and Facebook to squash competition in online ad space are set to be made public this week, a federal judge has ordered. The judge's ruling, revealed in court documents on Friday, marks a defeat for Google, which had fought for extensive redactions in antitrust complaint brought by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton last year. Google had argued that parts of the complaint contained confidential business information that would unfairly hurt the search giant if made public. Now, I understand Google is my boss and I love my job greatly. But, I'm also happy for the people that view my stuff on Odyssey or BitChute and choose to back me in other ways, like on my Subscribestar. So I'm happy wherever you watch, as long as you're here. The idea of the antitrust thing, just to give you the 30,000-foot view of it, is simply when big businesses work together to make it impossible to compete or for new businesses to come in, that's when the government usually gets involved. And they're supposed to stop this sort of thing. In my opinion, we go way back in the day when they broke up the Pac Bells or the Bell South Telephone Company. Most of you probably aren't old enough to remember that. It even happened before my time. I just know about it. I don't know. This is where you hear people talking about breaking up Google and all this kind of stuff. But it's difficult to see that ever really being a reality. Now, if these details become made public, that will certainly be a stain on Google. But it seems like every time this happens, all the government does is just issue a massive fine to Facebook and to Google. Where that money goes, nobody knows. Doesn't seem to go to funding competition. It doesn't seem to go back to the American people. Speaking of American people, Facebook admits, check that. Facebook agrees to pay $14 million to settle claims that it discriminated against United States workers. Facebook has agreed to pay more than $14 million to settle Trump-era claims, looks like they were correct, that it discriminated against American workers when filling lucrative jobs. According to federal prosecutors, Facebook had set aside more than 2,600 U.S.-based jobs, most of which paid six-figure salaries for foreign-born workers on temporary visas. The company refused to consider U.S. citizens for the jobs in violation of anti-discrimination laws, prosecutors said in the suit filed in December. Now, that's spicy. Now, let's see if our politicians care about it. It seems like we're always talking about Facebook and Google having too much power and swaying elections and this kind of thing. Now we know that they're outright refusing to hire Americans, which is curious to say the least, given where they're headquartered. Until Tuesday's agreement, Facebook will force over fork over $5 million fine to the government. Okay. Yeah, that really helps the workers. And pay out $9.5 million to the workers who were discriminated against. It should be all 15. The Mark Zuckerberg-helmed social media giant will also be required to give its employees training to make a greater effort to recruit American workers. Wow, golly gee willikers. While the settlement represents a drop in the bucket for the company that took $86 billion in revenue last year, prosecutors nonetheless declared victory. Well, that's because that's what they do. Facebook is not above the law and must comply with the nation's federal civil rights laws, which prohibit discriminatory recruitment and hiring practice. Now, I'm not a lawyer, okay? And this is just an opinion about how it, quote unquote, feels to me. Doesn't it feel like really the government just wants to levy these big fines to fill their coffers for other things? Maybe I'm uneducated. Seriously. Maybe I'm uneducated and all these fines go into, funding other programs that help these workers, but it sure doesn't seem like it. It sure seems like, remember they paid $1 billion to the EU for Article 13 violations or something it was? Where'd that money go? Well, where does $1 billion go once you put it into the government machine? Certainly not to the people. Certainly not into tax relief for the middle class. These resolutions will enable us to continue to focus on hiring the best builders from both the U.S. and around the world and supporting the internal community of highly skilled visa holders who are seeking permanent residence. I'm assuming there's some sort of tax break for hiring people on visas, or that's why they would have do it. Speaking of foreigners, Facebook now, I don't know, that's not a good transition. Facebook admits to letting users share information on human smuggling. There is there are so many articles coming out. It is like, every time I refresh the news feed for Facebook, there's another piece of terrible news. What does it all mean? Probably nothing. But, for me, for a company that spent $500 billion to get this guy elected, who, of course, is the most popular president in the world's history forever and ever, these are the people now. You gave them the power, and now they're just shaking you down. Was it worth it? Because remember, the establishment media is just another arm of one side of the island government. Let's be clear. Facebook has admitted to allowing users to share information about how to enter the country illegally or request information on how to get over the border. The admission came after Attorney General Mark Brnovich wrote a letter to CEO Mark Zuckerberg to request information about the reports that people who move humans for a living are using the platform to advertise their services to help, quote, migrants on their dangerous journey and unlawful entry to the United States. Now, do I think that it's reasonable? So a lot of times there's like these, people that expect Facebook to be able to police every single post. And that would be somebody that is called a modern day leftist, I suppose. Not a liberal, a leftist. But I mean, there are always going to be posts that slip through the cracks. But when you have, the policies where I can't even make fun of the president, Facebook has a new policy where you're not allowed to make fun of journalists. When I can't do that, but you're allowing people to post job listings for coyotes, it's a little hypocritical. There is just, between Google and Facebook collusion getting dropped out into the public, with the trafficking revelations, Facebook identifies no mechanism to distinguish between authorized and unauthorized posts, nor is it clear how it differentiates between the two. Ultimately, Facebook's enforcement mechanism is a paper tiger, he wrote, because they're not worried about people getting smuggled or taken advantage of. What they're worried about is if you question the poke, or if you make fun of the president, or if you dare to make fun of a liberal activist, you get banned. You post a meme that's too spicy, banned. But if you want to move human bodies across the border, that seems totally fine. This is, just the beginning in a long list of articles that seem to just be pouring out all day long, between the government's collusion claims, the discrimination against American workers, the trafficking claims. I don't know. I mean, if we look back to yesterday, when they're talking about the journalists, the 30 journalists working on the coordinated dock, I mean, this seems like, I'm not exactly shocked to hear any of this. And I assume that's why they hit it as a preemptive strike. They're mostly concerned with their hiring practices getting out there, is what I'm assuming. The fact that they favor temporary visa holders instead of American workers in a country where they enjoy massive tax breaks and all sorts of things like that. It'll be interesting to see what additional fallout comes from all of this. But I, for one, am happy to see Facebook get taken down a peg. I'd be happy if they disappeared tomorrow. Likewise with Twitter. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned to this channel for all the latest updates by clicking that red subscribe button down below, and we'll talk to you again real soon.